Nod Cry is right around the corner, and we are about to unravel the mystery of the moons, as well as finally meet some of the most long-anticipated characters such as Varka and Alice. With this new chapter on the horizon, I've decided that for today's video, I want to look into the past for the sake of looking into the future. Prior to the release of the Genshin Impact game, Hoyo had already started releasing a manga connected to the title that comprised of 16 chapters and a prologue. The prologue takes place 1,000 years prior to the main story and gives more context regarding Vanessa, while the rest of the chapters kind of go over the Mondstadt crew's history with Dottore Kale, who unfortunately was once victim to the Doctor's experiments. For this video, I want to focus on the prologue, titled Songs of the Wind. I think it is really interesting to look back on this chapter in particular with everything that we know now. There are so many curious things, and a lot of it ties into lore that Hoyo only started expanding on more recently, such as the dragon race and the moons. Vanessa's own ancestry is also tied to Natlan's lost tribe, which is something we only recently learned more about upon Enjo's reappearance. Most importantly, I think this chapter might contain mentions of the morning stars, the ones the moons were in love with. So first, I'm going to summarize the events of the prologue chapter, then afterwards I'll go in depth on all of the thoughts that I have. In the opening panels, we are shown a young woman with a ball and chain attached to her ankle, checking on a sick child, presumably her sister. She apologizes for waking her up, and promises to be back the next day with more healing herbs. There's a pretty full-page panel, and we can see that our current location is the wilderness on the outskirts of Mondstadt. The fiery-haired young woman kneels to offer a prayer while her sister sneaks up behind her, and we learn that the older sister is named Vanessa, while the younger sister goes by Lind. Vanessa urges her little sister to go back inside, but Lind ignores that and urges her sister to look at how the floating abode of the gods seems closer than usual. What's strange about this is how the characters absolutely refer to this island as Celestia, but this is clearly not Celestia. At least, not the one we are familiar with. It's something we are going to cover in the analysis at the end, so I'm not going to go too deep into that here, but I at least wanted to mention it. Lind is urged by her older sister to head back inside and rest. We can tell that Vanessa carries a heavy responsibility on her shoulders as she speaks about a need to fight for everyone else's sake. Somewhere else nearby, Venti wakes up from a very long nap. I mean like the type of nap the Heavenly Principals are currently taking. Venti used up a lot of his energy when he scattered the snow, clove the mountains, and sowed the grains, allowing Mondstadt to enjoy the comforts it does today. Then, he established a bunch of festivals, told them all to live up to his alcoholism and party hard, then he set off for the wilderness, to sleep. However, the Mondstadt that Venti has awoken to is nothing like the vision he had for his people. During this era of Mondstadt's history, the land and the resources were controlled by rich nobles, with the Lawrence family, aka Eula's ancestors, at the top. The joys and freedoms that Barbatos had intended for all of his people to share in were privileges only given to the wealthy lords. A dragon known as Ursa the Drake has been terrorizing the lands for years, and with the vast resources at their disposal, the Lawrence family has been keeping the dragon at bay through various appeasements. Their influence over the situation with the dragon only adds to the power and leverage the wealthy family has. Except, Ursa the Drake and his minions have been increasing their activity recently, and however much of a handle Lawrence may think he has on the situation, it is clearly unsustainable. He does have a plan though, and that will come into play later. The newly awakened Venti has made it into the city and is attempting to serenade a fruit stall owner for an apple. As the people in the square crowd around the bard, we can see Vanessa is nearby purchasing the herbs for Lind. The stall owner is ultimately moved by Venti's efforts, and the bard is rewarded with a couple of apples for his performance. The man also warns Venti that not everyone would have been as kind, and that the carefree bard should tread carefully in this city, where the wealth disparity has left the honest worker with barely enough to make ends meet. When you see how sad Mondstadt was during this era, you really start to understand why some of the modern residents have so much apprehension or even disdain towards Eula, especially since other living members of the Lawrence family, like this loser, want to go back to the way it was. Venti woefully inquires about the state of the city, and the man replies that this oppressive environment is exactly how the lords want it, so they will strive to keep it that way. These words seem to remind Venti of Tevat's own celestial captors, and we are shown 3 silhouettes that seemingly belong to characters that we still have yet to see for ourselves. The kind stall owner then tells Venti that Ludi Harpestum is meant to be held today, and Venti gets a bit overexcited while imagining the festival that he had originally imagined for his people. A festival full of games and joy, where the champion of the games will choose a maiden, who will then, at the height of the festival, toss the harpestum into the crowd. Whoever picks it up will be blessed with a year's good fortune. Venti imagines the feasts held afterward, and showing off his skills as a bard during the festivities, and then bolts off in excitement. As he departs, the man warns the bard not to pick up the ball, as these events are not meant for the common folk. Venti acknowledges the warning from the dealer of apples, as he calls him, and then flexes that he can best himself at rhymes. The guy is just kind of like, okay, do what you want, I guess. Maybe this depressing city should once again be graced by the songs of the wind. Oh my god, they said the title, wow! Venti arrives at the courtyard where his statue is. The citizens of Mondstadt chatter and gossip about how a young lord from the Lawrence family will be getting the harpestum for the 5th year in a row now, and this year he is after the girl as well. Venti pushes his way to the front of the crowd for the tossing of the harpestum, which will be thrown down from a high tower. The girl looks absolutely terrified, which is entirely justified considering what this gross creature is planning with her. Venti declares the end of Lord Barca's reign by snatching up the ball and taunting the spoiled heir. Barca starts giving the whole, "Do you have any idea who I am?" routine, but Venti is just kind of like, neat, this ball is still mine though. At that point, the Lord officially crashes out, drawing his weapon, and a chase begins. Although, of course, this guy is just going to stand there and command the guards instead of actually doing anything, even after he drew his sword. While trying to plan his escape route mid-chase, Venti bumps into a brick wall named Vanessa, whom he instantly recognizes as a flame-touched Muratan. Venti takes a cowering stance behind Vanessa as Lord Barca catches up to him, but Vanessa passes her intimidation check, which shouldn't have been a difficult role for her here anyway, and Barca takes off. As Vanessa turns to check on Venti, the bard has already disappeared. However, the bag of herbs Vanessa had been carrying now contains 2 apples. Later that night, Vanessa seems to be having a talk with the rest of her kin about leaving Lind in their care while she takes care of something. Lord Barca then shows up, blustering that he will make her pay for earlier, now that his father has purchased Vanessa and her clan. As Vanessa rests beneath the moonlight in a prison cell, Venti shows up with a gentle tune and some keys to her cell. He plops down right next to his strong-willed savior from earlier, and the two share an awkward moment where they try to talk at the same time, before Venti is able to thank her for the aid in getting out of his predicament. He also expresses guilt, considering it's landed her in prison. To that, Vanessa replies that it makes no difference to her, because this entire city is a prison for her and her people. She spends her days as a slave who fights in the arena for others' entertainment. Venti tells the young warrior that her attitude is reflective of her Muratan heritage, describing them as a strong and proud people who dwell on the volcanic slopes of the west. Children of Murata, the Lady of Fire, are a hardy people blessed with a head of fiery red hair, but they are few in number and seldom seen in the north. Murata is one of the former Pyro Archons, whom Venti describes as a person who could be pretty obnoxious at times. Vanessa is confused about this, asking him exactly how old he is to have even been around back then. Fair question. Venti wonders about what happened to the elders of Vanessa's clan, who should be passing on this knowledge of their history to the younger generations. She recollects a life spent wandering the fields of the land of the wind. When struggling to find resources and food whilst fighting for their lives amidst the elements, there was no time for stories. Their elders taught them survival skills. A decade ago, during a harsh winter, Ursa the Drake subjugated her people for 4 whole days, which ended with her people being backed into a corner and driven into the city, where they would ultimately be enslaved by the oppressive aristocracy. They fell out of the jaws of the dragon and into the jaws of human greed. Once Vanessa finishes her tale about how her people ended up in the city, Venti attempts to lighten the mood through song, and breaks out the Lyre de Himmel, or the heavens in the common tongue. Wow, what a beautiful lyre. I hope nothing ever happens to it. Vanessa is just kind of like, dude, you named your lyre? Hear me, fiery-haired dame. Every being deserves a name to be called upon and woven into song. So, will you share your fair name? He's such a frickin' bard, oh my god. Now that the bard has learned her name, he admits that he would like to add her name to his songs. And with that, one of the most powerful friendships in the history of Mondstadt was forged. Later, Vanessa looks back on sweet promises from the elders that the gods would recognize the faithful, who would ascend to Celestia and protect the world alongside those gods. But the gods did not hear them. She asks this bard, this teller of stories, if he can tell her anything about Celestia. However, Venti, who knows a bit too much when it comes to this, dodges the subject and talks about making a break from the prison. Vanessa insists on staying put, for her final battle will be held tomorrow. Vanessa has made a contract with the Lawrence family, and as long as she can win 12 battles, her and her people will be awarded with freedom. Venti insists that it's too dangerous, and the aristocrats will surely double-cross her, considering these people even cheat in a simple festival ball game. However, Vanessa refuses to abandon her people. So Venti is like, fine, I guess I have no choice but to wait with you here then. The next morning, Vanessa is awoken by a spoiled rich child, who drags her out to the battlefield, where she is dismayed to find all of her kin have been thrust into the conflict rather than just her. Lord Lawrence establishes the terms. Vanessa's challenger will be Ursa the Drake, and if she wins, he'll offer up his property and the keys to Mondstadt. So clearly, we are seeing Lawrence's earlier mentioned plan to deal with Ursa the Drake coming to fruition. He thinks that he can just offer up all of these refugees from the Lost Natlan tribe to the dragon as a large enough offering to keep the peace for some time to come. He thinks that there's no way Vanessa and the other fighters can possibly win when they have to worry about protecting those who can't fight as well. He's so overconfident in the idea that this couldn't possibly fail that he's bet his property and the keys to the city. Haha, idiot. Panic swarms over Vanessa as the battle begins, and silhouettes of flying hilichurls approach from the distance. Some of the city's common folk start rioting over the unfair conditions of the fight, and Lawrence barks orders to throw anyone else who wants to be a hero outside the wall. Vanessa takes the lead, telling the fighters to pair up and to keep the elderly and the children in the center, as they become overwhelmed by the dragon's minions and try to retreat back to the city. Archers unleash volleys of arrows over them, and Lawrence makes it clear that this is a battle that they are not allowed to retreat from. Vanessa faces the dragon, channels her resolve, and slashes through a whole wave of hilichurls. Venti finally joins the fray, wearing his full angelic Barbatos form. He offers Vanessa some assistance in combat against the dragon, allowing Vanessa to land a critical hit, and so Ursa the Drake flees to fight another day. Unfortunately, he would continue antagonizing the people of Mondstadt until many years later when he'd meet his end at the hands of Dottore. As the battle dies down, it finally dawns on Vanessa that her new friend is the god of anemo himself. Together, they promise to uphold the right to freedom not only for the Muratans, but for all of Mondstadt. Naturally, Venti drops some rhymes in order to remind Lawrence of the terms he had set for the challenge. Lawrence's overconfidence severely backfired, as his plan was foiled by a flame-touched Muratan and an angelic twink. The nobles were forced to hand over their property and the keys to the city, leading to the fall of the aristocracy. Vanessa's people were set free, and she established the Knights of Favonius, leading to the Mondstadt that we are familiar with today. Eventually, Vanessa would ascend to Celestia, becoming the Falcon of the West. During these panels where Vanessa is ascending, Venti sings a most peculiar ballad that contains by far the weirdest things he has ever said, and for Venti that is saying something. So let's just read it in full. In other distant worlds, Pangu gave his blood to form the rivers and seas. The gods sacrificed Purusha and cut his body to pieces, and then fashioned all living beings from those parts. The brain of the giant Ymir became clouds. Their sacrifices seeded life in the unliving cosmos. These songs sing of the primeval ones. Yes. What the fuck does this mean? Care to explain, Bard? No? Just going to spin a vague tale about 3 different cosmic men and then refuse to elaborate anymore? Okay, well, I think I've figured it out, and we'll go over it in the final part of the analysis. Anyway, 1,000 years later, Venti shares a glance with a passing falcon that we are led to believe is Vanessa herself, as he sits beside the traveler, recounting her tale. I really do enjoy this chapter. You hear about Vanessa so much in the game, and I really love that we are able to experience some of her story through this illustrated comic. I really enjoy getting to actually see how Mondstadt was liberated from the brutal aristocracy. It goes so well with Mondstadt being the nation of freedom. The first little thing I would like to bring attention to is the phrasing used when they tell you about the terraforming of Mondstadt and the subsequent departure of Barbatos. At the end, it says, "Pleased with what he had achieved, the god then took his lyre and set off for the wilderness." This reminds me of some of the things Zamaran says. Ignorance might be a blessing, and knowledge might bring forth calamity. Only that which graced with the ambrosia of knowledge can flourish into the strong. Only that which has been tested with the desolation of wandering can brave the wilderness. With the mentions of wandering and wilderness, our protagonist being the traveler, and the fact that Wanderer is an anemo character, oh, that wording is intentional. Something that really stood out to me about Venti in this chapter is the association they have given between him and apples. Now, apple symbolism is a literary device that's used a lot, so you're probably quite familiar with it and how it usually calls back to the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden that Lucifer tempted Eve to partake in. Back in Sumeru, we learned that another term used for the abyss in Tevat is forbidden knowledge. So when it comes to Genshin, the forbidden fruit is the abyss. We learned during Venti's story quest that his human form is based on a very important friend that he met in Old Mondstadt, back when he was still just a wisp of the winds. When they show us Venti's original form, he looks suspiciously like a little baby abyss mage. So I find it quite interesting and fitting that Venti has been given forbidden fruit association. Genshin takes very strong inspiration from Gnosticism, and I've spoken on this channel before about how Eve partaking in the fruit of knowledge was viewed as a positive thing by the Gnostics. Skirk has also told us that the abyss is just the world's shadow, and that it isn't going anywhere. It's not something that you can just get rid of. It really feels like the direction we are heading with the abyss might be the eldritch horror is misunderstood type of thing. I also want to talk about Vanessa. For one, she takes very obvious inspiration from the Magi character, Morgiana. I knew it from the moment I saw her in the manga. The Muratans in general seem to be referencing the Phanes people, who are a hunting tribe descended from a species known as red lions. As a tribe comprised of humans possessing a surreal level of strength, their people were highly valued as slaves, which left their culture torn apart by the slave trade. Morgiana's early character arc deals with the process of freeing oneself mentally, even after the physical chains have been broken. The inspiration really comes through in how the Miratans are treated within the Lawrence family's Mondstadt, and Hoyo wasn't trying to hide it at all. They wear these references proudly on their sleeve. Genshin Impact and the Magi series actually work with a lot of the same themes and inspirations, such as deriving a naming scheme from the Lesser Keys of Solomon. With the Phanes being descended from red lions, it feels like Vanessa being referred to as the Lion's Fang here is no coincidence. This moniker even connects to one of the Four Winds, the Lion of the South, which is a title passed down among the Grand Masters of the Knights of Favonius. We now know far more about the Miratans than we ever did before, thanks to Enjo. As we all noticed, modern-day Natlan has a tribe that resonates with each of the 7 elements. Except for one. What happened to the Anemo tribe? Well, in the quest Last Survivor of Tenocht Sitok, Enjo gives a breakdown of this history. He tells us about a kingdom that lived under a benevolent and wise king. When a powerful enemy threatened the king sacrificed his own life to save it, with his most steadfast follower taking over the throne in the aftermath. The new king would fall to poisonous corruption and evil, causing a civil war to break out among its inhabitants. Once the opposers of the evil king slayed the tyrant, his people would be exiled. The banished would split into 2 groups, with one refusing to leave and settling down in a remote part of Natlan. They would continue fighting for their right to the kingdom until only one of them was left. The person we know as the hero who hailed from no tribe, Tenoch. The other group, the ones who had left Natlan 500 years prior, would travel to the true Land of the Wind, where they would become known as Flame-Touched Miratans. Although, we don't get to learn more about where that name comes from, at least not today. I loved getting this story from Enjo. I was so excited to see him again, and he really served with the lore drops. Moving on, the next thing I want to talk about are the 3 silhouettes that Venti pictured in this panel. Hoyo seems to have had a pretty good idea of their longer-term plans for this story even back then, so I am assuming these are still relevant entities that we will run into eventually. Their final character silhouettes will probably just end up a bit different. They appear right after the kind stall owner talks about the lords wanting to maintain a status quo where they reap the benefits from their lofty mansions, while everyone else stays in their place. So I am assuming we are drawing a parallel between the aristocratic rulers and Celestia. Therefore, these are some entities that are very close to the throne. Since there are only 3 of them, I don't think these are early silhouette designs of the Shades. They all seem to have horns, so maybe they are dragons that sided with the Heavenly Principles. I'm not sure if they are the Moon Sisters, because I don't think all of the Moon Sisters willingly worked alongside Primordial One. Although, Arlecchino's weapon implies that there may have been a betrayer moon that sided with the usurper. I do believe at least one of these entities is meant to be the second descender, who collaborated with the Heavenly Principles to make the Gnosis from the third descender. Maybe one of the others is the betrayer moon. And that's about all I have to say about this. The next item on the list is the Celestia that's not Celestia. Throughout this chapter, people keep pointing at this floating island and talking about it as if it is Celestia, and I mean, why wouldn't they? Celestia is a floating island in the sky, and that is, indeed, a floating island. However, this isn't the same Celestia as the one we see in-game. I already touched on this a little bit in my last video, but it looks completely different, and this floating island seems to be associated with the dragons. This sky island in the manga, along with the one that we see in the Dragonspine and Tsurumi murals, resemble the islands inside of Mount Tolen. Even the landscape and slopes visible on this Celestia in the manga resembles what we see in Tolen. The shape of the spire on this island reminds me of the giant pillar that holds up the Night Kingdom, and this thing matches the dragon's architecture. The moon is behind this island in every single panel where we see it, and the moons were raised from the earth by the Dragon King Nibelung. The moons are also relevant to the upcoming story with how important they are for Nod Cry. There's also literally a panel showing the island with dragons flying around it. For the next topic, I do just briefly want to talk about the weird hilichurls that appeared during the fight against Ursa. This might mean something and it might not, but their masks are completely different from the masks we usually see on the Hillies, and they have these bat-like wings that let them fly. I've never seen nor heard of a hilichurl flying beyond the rogues that use the anemo slimes. Alice's catapult doesn't count. The hilichurls that appear later on in the manga have the same masks with a Homa symbol on them that we are used to seeing in-game, and none of them fly. So these seem to be a different type of hilichurl that maybe isn't as common anymore. The Curse of the Wilderness was placed on all of the non-pure-blooded Conrians once they reached the surface realms, turning them into hilichurls. Therefore, a fair amount of the Hillies currently populating the surface probably used to be Conrians, but not all of them, clearly. The hilichurls have been around for much longer than 500 years, so the Conrians weren't the only victims of this curse. Paraneri implies that the curse which causes churlification is a punishment for abandoning your god. And many humans with fickle allegiances probably fell victim to this curse during the time of the Archon War. I wonder who these hilichurls used to be. The final thing I'd like to address, the elephant in the room. Yeah, it's that weird story Venti tells at the end. Who the hell are Ymir, Purusha, and Pangu? I think they may be the morning stars mentioned in Moonlit Bamboo Forest, the ones the Moon Sisters were in love with. Ymir, Pangu, and Purusha all fit into the category of a cosmic man, which usually are figures found at the center of creation myths that somehow sowed the seeds of existence, or enabled the universe to exist in some sort of way. Technically, Purusha is more of a concept, but Purusha is kind of the soul of the universe, eternal and unmoving, and existing within everyone as the part of the self that is immortal. Ymir is a Norse god whose body served as the raw material during the creation of the universe. Pangu is a cosmic man of Chinese legend whose body, after his death, served as various geological features of the earth, such as mountains and rivers. It's also said that Pangu's eyes became the sun and the moon. So I would also like to point out how Paraneri refers to the crimson moon that loomed over Conria as a giant horrified eye, which is usually associated to Ghroth from the Lovecraft mythos. The web event said that when the iridescent moon was shattered, the crimson shadow fell into the abyssal sea, which confirmed the crimson moon over Conria was connected to the Moon Sisters. So we do have a literal example of an eye moon in-game. In terms of the sun, there's also Deseret, who was a deity of the sun, and he's often portrayed as this star with an eye in the center. I just found these things pretty interesting in the context of Pangu. It's not exactly a mystery why we are pulling names from several different creation myths, considering Venti's tale describes these entities becoming the building blocks of existence and sowing life in the universe. I'm pretty sure the flower piece from Finale of the Deep Galleries is talking about Ymir, Pangu, and Purusha, with these mentions of the first angel sharing the forbidden secret behind the matter of creation with Voyager. And to the one she loved, she poured out the matter of creation, that most forbidden of unspeakable secrets. Alas, that your ruler would dare to blaspheme such noble beings. Even the demonic sculptors of bloody nightmares, who delight in tormenting souls, would be taken aback by such cruelty. The moons, who were allegedly in love with these morning stars, are even mentioned towards the end of this description, as they were watching over this conversation between the first angel and Voyager, and quietly approved of their rebellion. Now, Phanes just so happens to be a cosmic man from Orphic Greek mythology, and Phanes is the entity we've been led to believe represents the current heavenly principles. Now, remember, the Primordial One is the light who casts the shades, and so Phanes is like a sun, like a morning star. Since Pangu, Ymir, and Purusha are concepts or entities that occupy a similar space as Phanes in their respective mythos, I think it would make a lot of sense for them to be the morning stars. And that's it for this recap and analysis. Thank you so much if you made it all the way to the end. I was pretty excited about the morning stars theory. I hope you guys like it. Please consider engaging with the video through a like or a comment, as it really helps with prompting YouTube to show this video to more people. If you want more content like this, please hit that subscribe button. I've also got a Patreon that just kind of exists as an optional way to support me. With that, hopefully I'll see you next time.